The town of Greywick was small, quiet, and already dying when the carnival closed. Once, its streets had been filled with shopkeepers, children on bicycles, church picnics in the square. But when the amusement park shut its gates that fateful October night, something in the town shut too. Businesses left, families moved away. What remained were peeling houses and people too stubborn or too frightened to leave. The park still sat on the edge of town, visible from nearly anywhere, its rusted Ferris wheel clawing at the horizon like a broken halo. Locals didn't talk about it much. If they did, it was always in hushed voices. But on autumn nights, when the leaves blew down Main Street like scraps of old tickets, the younger kids would whisper, "Dares were made." Legends passed down. Some swore they'd seen lights flicker behind the gate. Others claimed music drifted on the wind if you stood close enough. The truth was simple. No one who had gone inside after dark had ever stayed long. And now, on the last Friday in October, 5 teenagers stood at the edge of the road, staring at the broken fence that sagged against weeds. Behind it, the park loomed, patient and silent, waiting. "Come on, it's just a bunch of old junk," said Kyle, tall and cocky, though his voice shook. "We'll be in and out before midnight, or before the cops see us," muttered Hannah, hugging her jacket tighter. Her auburn hair was tied back, and her eyes darted from the Ferris wheel to the weeds pushing through the asphalt. "Cops don't care," said Tyler, who always went along with Kyle. "It's Halloween weekend. Half the town's drunk anyway." Jenna, the quietest of the group, traced her shoe in the dirt. "My brother said he heard voices when he went in once." "Your brother's an idiot," Kyle shot back. "It's just wind in the pipes. Right, Nate?" The fifth, Nate, shrugged. He didn't like being here, but he liked being called a coward even less. Wind, but as he said it, a gust swept through the fence, carrying a faint sound, something too sharp, too deliberate to be wind, almost like a note from an organ. The group froze, listening. Kyle smirked, though the color drained from his cheeks. "See, music must be a welcome song." And with that, he pushed through the fence. The air inside the park felt different, heavier somehow, tinged with damp earth and rust. Leaves swirled along the cracked paths, piling up against forgotten food carts. The 5 teenagers walked in a tight knot, trying to laugh, their voices small against the hulking shapes of rides looming in the dark. The carousel was the first thing they saw. It stood in the center of the park like a sentinel, horses frozen mid-leap, paint peeling to reveal gray wood beneath. The poles were streaked with rust, their gold long gone. "Creepy?" Hannah whispered. "Beautiful," Jenna corrected, though her voice trembled. "Bet it still works," Kyle said. He stepped closer, placing a hand on one horse's chipped mane. The air seemed to hum beneath his fingers. Suddenly, the calliope music returned so faint they almost thought they imagined it. A few notes, broken and warped, drifting through the air. Nate swallowed. "There's no power here." "Yeah." Kyle grinned, but his hand dropped quickly from the horse. "Maybe someone left the jukebox running." No one laughed. "Let's check it out," Kyle said, climbing onto the platform. The boards groaned beneath his weight. The others hesitated, The carousel loomed in silence now, but the air felt charged, waiting. Finally, Tyler followed, then Hannah, then the rest. The horses were arranged in perfect circles, but their faces were wrong. Too stretched, too hollow, eyes gouged by rot until they looked almost human. Some bared teeth, yellowed beneath peeling paint. Jenna stepped closer to one near the center, brushing away a clump of cobweb. The horse's head jerked her. Maybe the wind just shifted her sleep, but... She gasped and stumbled back. Relax, Kyle said, though his own breathing was shallow. He grabbed one of the poles and gave it a shake. The whole carousel shuddered, and then, with a groan like bones grinding, it began to turn. Slowly at first, then picking up speed, the horses rising and falling as if waking from sleep. The music started again, louder this time, notes twisted, sour, but undeniably real. Nope, Hannah said, backing away. No, 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 no. But the carousel spun faster, the horses bobbing violently, eyes gleaming with the reflection of the harvest moon. And for just a second, Nate swore he saw riders. They ran, stumbling off the platform, breath clouding in the night air. The carousel slowed behind them, the music dying to a whimper, but none dared look back. Ahead, the Ferris wheel towered above them, its skeletal frame groaning as the wind pushed through it. The gondolas swayed, though the air was calm. It's moving, Jenna whispered. Wind, Tyler said again, though his voice broke. The wheel groaned, turning just an inch, then stopping. The gondolas clinked like chains. Hello? Kyle called, as if daring someone to answer. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, from high above, a voice whispered down, too faint to catch, too sharp to be mistake. Hannah clutched Nate's arm. Did you hear? The wheel turned again, a fraction more, before locking in place. This time, Nate saw it clearly, a shadow in one of the gondolas, sitting perfectly still, watching. They hurried down the cracked path that led away from the Ferris wheel, each step echoing against broken pavement. Their flashlights cut through the dark in nervous sweeps, beams bouncing off shuttered food stalls and prize booths. The midway stretched before them like a ghost town. Booths still bore faded signs. Ring toss, win a bear, test your strength. Rotted stuffed animals dangled from strings, their fur stiff with mildew, button eyes reflecting the light in strange, glimmering ways. Looks like somebody left in a hurry, Nate murmured. Or died in a hurry, Tyler said, trying to joke, but the words fell flat. Hannah pointed at one of the booths. A balloon dart game still had darts stuck in the board, but the balloons hadn't popped. Their skins were gray and wrinkled, sagging like deflated lungs, yet they pulsed faintly, as though filled with something thicker than air. Don't, Jenna said sharply when Kyle reached toward one. He pulled back, smirking to cover his nerves. Relax. They're just old balloons. But as they walked on, one of the balloons popped by itself. The sound sharp and wet, and something dark dribbled down the board. No one spoke after that. The smell hit them before they saw it. Sweet, cloying, thick as syrup. The cotton candy stand sagged in the shadows, roof half collapsed, glass cloudy with grime. But from the cracks between its boards, the scent of sugar wafted strong and fresh, like a carnival day that never ended. That's impossible, Hannah whispered. That smell, it's bait. Jenna said. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. It wants us to come closer. Kyle scoffed but kept his distance. Even he wasn't eager to test the stand. Probably a bag of sugar rotting in there or something. Sugar doesn't rot like that, Nate said. He swallowed against the rising bile in his throat. The sweetness wasn't pleasant, it was rotten sweet, clinging the way flowers smell at a funeral home. As they backed away, the glass in the stand shifted, fogging from the inside. For a heartbeat, the shapes of hands pressed against it, too many to count, leaving streaks that smeared like melted sugar. Then it was gone, leaving only the smell, heavier than before. The path bent, leading them to the jagged outline of the funhouse. Its faded sign still clung to rusted hinges. Hall of mirrors. The door hung crooked, yawning into blackness. They hesitated, but Kyle grinned. Perfect. Let's see how ugly you all really are. Inside, dust coated the air. Their flashlights danced over mirror after mirror, cracked and spotted with age. The reflections were wrong, not just distorted but delayed, as if the glass thought for a moment before answering. Creepy, Tyler muttered, waving his hand. In the mirror, his reflection didn't wave back right away. When it did, the smile was wider, teeth sharper. Did you see that? Hannah whispered. Nate's chest tightened. He walked past a tall, warped mirror and caught sight of himself. Only it wasn't him. His reflection stood still, smiling faintly, even as he moved. Let's go, Jenna said suddenly, her voice sharp. But as they turned to leave, the mirrors began to hum, low and vibrating. In their glass, shadows gathered. Riders from the carousel, passengers from the wheel faces pale, eyes hollow. And then the mirrors all shattered at once. They stumbled back outside, glass crunching underfoot. None dared speak until they stood on the funhouse's tilted porch. Enough, Hannah said. We need to leave. Now, not yet, Kyle said, though his face was bloodless. We've come this far. The funhouse interior was worse. The tilted floors groaned under their steps, dust rolling down the slants like spilled powder. Every corner seemed to laugh, soft, distant chuckles at first, then louder, bouncing around until it was impossible to tell where it came from. Jenna pressed her hands to her ears. Stop it, she begged. The walls rattled, paint peeled in long strips, curling like paper tongues. Their flashlights flickered, plunging them into dark. When light returned, Nate froze. The room ahead wasn't empty anymore. Figures stood along the walls. Half glimpsed in the shifting beams, carnival workers in torn uniforms, their faces paper white, smiles painted on. They didn't move. They just watched. And when the group backed toward the exit, the laughter swelled into a roar. They burst free of the funhouse, running until the laughter faded behind them. Breathless, they stumbled to a narrow waterway choked with leaves and debris. Above it, a sign dangled by one chain. Tunnel of Love. Are you kidding me? Tyler panted. The boat still bobbed faintly on the water, though the canal was half drained. Without warning, one of the boats slid forward, grinding along the track into the tunnel's yawning black mouth. There's no current, Nate whispered. It moved by itself. The air smelled of mildew and wet wood. But beneath it was something else. Perfume old and sour, clinging like the cotton candy's sweetness. Not going in there, Hannah said, backing away. But as she spoke, another boat lurched forward, splashing water. Then another. Soon they all were moving, slipping into the tunnel one by one, though no force propelled them. From inside came the faint sound of whispers. Not one voice, but many, murmurs weaving together like a song just beyond understanding. The last boat rocked gently at the edge, waiting. The tunnel whispered behind them long after they turned away. No one wanted to admit it, but the voices seemed to cling, drifting on the night air like smoke. The midways stretched deeper into the park. More booths stood in crooked rows, their paint peeling, signs dangling on rusted nails. One booth caught Hannah's eye. A shooting gallery. Wooden ducks lined the conveyor, their faces chewed by time. A rifle still lay across the counter, coated in grime. "Don't touch it," Nate warned when Tyler reached for it. "I wasn't going to," Tyler lied. His hand hovered, shaking. Farther down, a ring-toss booth displayed its prizes: stuffed bears, dolls, and clown heads. Their fur and fabric had rotted away in places, exposing stuffing and wood. Yet their button eyes gleamed like wet stones. Kaye snorted. These things wouldn't scare a toddler. One of the dolls blinked. The group recoiled, but the doll hung still, head tilted, stitched mouth sealed. Then another prize shifted. A bear's head turned ever so slightly toward them. The row of toys began to tremble, twitching against their strings like fish hooked underwater. And slowly, every single glassy eye fixed on the 5 intruders. Kyle forced a laugh, though his voice cracked. Cheap animatronics must be rigged to spook trespassers. Animatronics don't run without power, Jenna snapped. Before anyone could argue, a faint clink echoed from the booth. The rings, dusty, brittle, slid across the counter by themselves, forming a neat stack. Then a voice rasped from the shadows behind the counter. "Would you like to play?" A man stood there now, or what looked like one. His carnival uniform sagged with rot. Name tag rusted beyond reading. His face was pale, waxy. His smile stretched too wide. "Step right up," he crooned, voice brittle as paper. "Win a prize. Everyone wins a prize." No one moved. "Go on," he whispered. "It only costs time." At that, Jenna yanked Kyle's sleeve. "We're leaving now." But the man only laughed, a sound like coins rattling in an empty can. His hand slid forward, offering the rings. His skin was gray, fingers long and jointed wrong. The group bolted before anyone could take them. As they fled, the voice followed. Everyone plays eventually. The next stretch of Midway opened into a small building with boarded windows. The paint on its sign had nearly vanished, but they could still read the word. "Arcade." "Don't," Hannah begged. "We shouldn't go inside." But the sound of beeping drifted out bright. Electronic tones. Impossible, drawn like moths. They stepped in. Inside, rows of arcade cabinets stood dusty and cracked. Their screens should have been dead. Instead, Dozens flickered with light. Pac-Man darted across one, his yellow mouth chomping endlessly. Space Invaders glowed green on another. But the games weren't right. Pac-Man's maze twisted like veins, pulsing. The invaders were human faces, shrieking in silence as they descended. On the far side, a claw machine rattled, its glass fogged, but something moved. Inside a pale, twisted figure curled like a doll. "Turn it off," Jenna whispered. "There's no power here," Nate reminded her. His hands shook. The claw descended on its own, metal fingers scraping. The thing inside twitched, pressing its face against the glass. Its eyes were hollow, mouth sewn shut. The group fled before the claw could lift it. They stumbled out into the night, gasping for clean air. The wind carried dead leaves, rattling across the ground like bones. Ahead stood a fortune-teller machine beneath a collapsed awning. Dust streaked the glass case, but inside, the mannequin sat upright. Madame Zora, her painted face cracked, jeweled hands poised above a crystal ball. "Keep walking," Hannah said, her voice shaking. But as they passed, the machine lit up. Bulbs sparked, the crystal ball glowing faint blue. The mannequin's head turned. "Your time is short," she whispered. The voice was real, not recorded. "But the park will last forever." A card slid from the slot, fluttering to the ground. Nate bent against, all reasoned to pick it up. It was blank. No fortune, just empty cardstock. When he looked up, Madame Zora's face was pressed to the glass, closer than it should have been. Her eyes rolled white, mouth opening too wide, as if to scream. The lights went out. They ran until their lungs burned, until the booths gave way to a plaza at the park's heart. In the center stood a giant clock tower, iron hands frozen at midnight. The bell above sagged, cracked in half. But when they entered the plaza, the air shifted. Time felt strange slowed, stretched. Nate checked his phone. Dead battery. He swore it had been full. "Mine too," Hannah said. She shook her head. It's only been an hour since we came in, right?" Kyle frowned. "No way. Feels like all night." The clock's hands twitched. The iron groaned, jerking forward 1 minute. Then another dung. The bell rang, impossibly loud. Dung. Leaves lifted into the air, suspended as though time itself had paused. The group stood frozen too, unable to move, until the final chime echoed into silence. When it ended, the plaza looked different. The booths were gone. The midway had changed. Paths no longer led the way they had before. The park had shifted, and now they were somewhere new. The plaza was wrong. Paths twisted away into shapes the group didn't remember. The air was heavier now, the sky darker, though the moon hadn't moved. They pressed together, moving cautiously down a narrow lane flanked by shuttered game stalls. That was when Nate heard it. Footsteps. At first he thought it was Tyler behind him, but when he slowed, the steps didn't. They echoed just a fraction after the group's own, dragging slightly as if someone was limping. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. The others froze. The sound continued. Scrape, Step! Scrape, step? Hannah clutched his arm. It's following us. Kyle swung his flashlight behind them. Nothing. Just a corridor of broken boots. But the sound grew louder, closer, matching their pace. Run, Jenna said. Her voice cracked. We have to run. They bolted, footsteps slamming against the cracked asphalt, but the other steps followed, never fading, never faltering. Only when they rounded a sharp corner did the sound vanish, entirely cut off like a snapped string. They stopped, bent over, gasping. The silence pressed in around them, thick as fog. Then, faint at first, came laughter. It wasn't close. It wasn't even clear. It sounded like an old recording played over tin speakers, warped with age. Children laughing, high-pitched and shrill, adults chuckling, snippets of carnival joy stitched together wrong. The sound drifted on the air, pulling them toward a shadowed track that curved away into the trees. A sign stood crooked at its entrance, the laughing track fun for the whole family. The track itself was broken, rails snapped and twisted, but the laughter continued, rising and falling, louder as they approached. And then, with a groan, a roller cart rattled down the ruined rails. No one was inside. Another followed, then another, each empty car rolling along as though full of invisible passengers. From the trees, more laughter swelled, the sound of clapping hands, cheering voices, an audience watching what no one else could see. Don't look, Jenna whispered. Whatever's in those cars, don't look. But Nate looked, and for just a moment, he saw them. Pale faces pressed against the car rails, mouths open in laughter that made no sound. The track wound deeper into the park, merging with the base of a massive wooden roller coaster. Its beams rose high into the dark, creaking as the wind pressed through. The sign above its archway read, "The Screamer." Kyle tilted his head back, whistling low. That's beautiful. The ride looked dead boards, splintered, bolts rusted. Yet as they watched, the chain lift groaned. Slowly, the first car began to climb the hill, dragged by no force. Click. 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 The group backed away, necks craning upward as the car reached the peak, and then, with a shriek of rust, it plunged down. The track thundered. The car roared along the rails, rattling past them so close the air seemed to shiver. Empty, but the screams were real. Dozens of voices, shrieking in terror, tearing through the night as the invisible riders plummeted past. The group stood frozen until the car slowed to a stop. The screams died into silence. Then, from above, another chain began to click, and another car started to climb. They ran, stumbling down another path, away from the coaster's echoing screams. The night pressed in heavier than before. The carnival seemed to breathe. They didn't notice Tyler falling behind until it was too late. Nate? Tyler's voice cracked, panicked. The group turned. He was gone. Tyler? Kyle shouted, swinging his light. Nothing but trees, broken booths, shadows stretching wrong. Where did he go? Hannah's voice was high, breaking. He was just here, Nate stammered. His hands shook. Right here. Tyler! Jenna called, voice echoing through the park. The only reply was laughter. Faint, distant, the same warped recording. Then, just at the edge of Nate's light, he thought he saw Tyler, standing still, watching them. But when Nate blinked, the figure was gone. Hannah's breath hitched. He's gone. He's gone. Just like the stories. Silence fell. Heavy. Absolute. One less set of footsteps followed them as they moved on. The four left pressed together, as if their shoulders alone could keep the dark at bay. Tyler's absence hung in the air like smoke. None dared say it aloud, but each of them knew he wasn't coming back. They followed a path lined with dead trees whose branches curled like claws. The leaves shifted in the wind, though the ground remained still. Then a voice drifted down the path ahead. "Guys!" They froze. It was Tyler. His voice, shaky, frightened. "Wait for me. I'm right here." "Don't," Jenna whispered. Her hands trembled. "That's not him." But Kyle stepped forward. "Tyler, where are you?" The voice came again, closer. "I can't see. Help me." Nate's stomach turned. The words were wrong, flat, hollow, like an echo replaying from tape. When Kyle shouted again, the trees shifted. For just a moment, Nate saw something step between them. Too tall, too thin, its head cocked, mouth hanging open, spilling Tyler's voice. They ran before Kyle could chase it. The path spilled into another plaza. This one was alive with color. Strings of carnival lights blazed overhead, strung between poles, their bulbs glowing red and gold. The rides here spun and shifted in jerky motion, though no one manned the controls. The tilt-a-whirl screeched, carts spinning violently, sparks showering the asphalt. The swinging ship groaned, swooping too high, vanishing briefly into the dark sky before crashing down again. Kyle stared, breathless. How is it running?" "It's not," Jenna whispered. "It's showing us what it wants us to see." Then the music started bright, cheery calliope tunes, so loud the ground vibrated. It was almost joyful, almost enough to make them smile, until the laughter joined in. It came from everywhere. The rides, the stalls, the trees. Hundreds of voices, cheering, clapping. Invisible families enjoying their night out. Hannah clapped her hands to her ears, sobbing. "Make it stop. Please make it stop." The lights overhead flickered. For just a heartbeat, every bulb burned black, and the crowd's laughter turned to screams. The screaming faded to silence, but the air stayed charged, thick with static. Then, faintly, the sound of children crying. The group followed it unwillingly, as though their feet moved on their own. The cries led them to a small play area fenced in with bent metal bars. Inside, rides meant for toddlers sat rusting. Teacups, a miniature train, a small slide. At first, the place seemed empty, but then shapes flickered between the rides. S'more ships. Children. Their faces were pale, eyes dark hollows. They moved slowly, like sleepwalkers, circling the rides that no longer turned. One little girl stood apart, holding a balloon. Its string frayed, its skin sagging gray. "Help us," she whispered. Her voice was thin, ragged. Jenna took a step forward. "No," Nate hissed, grabbing her arm. The girl tilted her head, her mouth stretched wide, too wide, splitting until it reached her ears. The balloon burst with a wet pop, and the children vanished. A deep horn bellowed in the distance, low and mournful. "Please," Hannah begged. No more, but the sound grew louder, joined by drums, rattles, the clang of cymbals, music offbeat, twisted but unmistakable. A parade. Down the midway it came. Figures marched in torn costumes, paper MCH heads sagging with rot. Clowns grinned with painted mouths. Dancers twirled on broken ankles. Baton twirlers flung sticks through the air only to have them vanish before they landed. Behind them came floats, sagging under their own weight. One bore a carousel horse with no skin. Another carried cages of something that moved but couldn't be seen. The figure's eyes glowed faint in the dark as they passed, staring straight ahead. Kyle couldn't help it. He whispered, "They're beautiful." As if on cue, the parade halted. Every figure turned its head in unison, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The figures stepped from the parade. Their movements were slow, deliberate, like marionettes pulled by invisible strings. Kyla Hannah hissed, "Don't move." But he didn't listen. Something in their gaze drew him forward. His flashlight slipped from his hand, clattering to the ground. The lead clown extended a gloved hand, rotted lace dangling from its sleeve. Kyle raised his own as though entranced. "Don't." Jenna screamed, but when she lunged, the air thickened, holding her back. The parade figures closed round Kyle, their painted mouths opening wide in silent screams. He vanished into their mass of bodies. When they passed, he was gone. Only his flashlight remained, beams shining weakly across the broken pavement. The parade continued down the midway, music rising again, leaving behind just three: Nate, Hannah, Jenna. Three where there had been five, and the park was still hungry. The midway ended at a stage. Its curtains sagged in tatters, but the spotlight above burned faintly, casting pale light onto the boards. Three wooden chairs sat in front. The group stopped, unwilling to enter, but the curtains pulled back on their own. Puppets dangled from strings. A clown, a strong man, a ballerina. Their paint was cracked, eyes sunken, but they twitched as though alive. "Ladies and gentlemen," croaked a voice from the shadows, "welcome to the show." The puppets danced, jerking violently, strings cutting into their limbs. Their mouths opened, and screams poured out not from the puppets, but from somewhere deeper. The ballerina turned her head toward Jenna. Its painted smile cracked wider. "Stay." Nate grabbed her hand. They ran before the curtain could close again. They stumbled into a hedge maze. Its archway leaned, but the hedges stood impossibly tall, blocking out the sky. "We'll cut through," Nate said, though he didn't believe it. The maze twisted and shifted. Every turn looked the same. Branches scraped their arms, snagging clothes. Behind them, footsteps echoed, heavy, deliberate. Something followed unseen. They ran. But the path split endlessly, leading them deeper. At one dead end, they turned to retreat. The way behind had closed. The hedge was solid wall. The branches rustled. From within them, faces emerged, pale, eyeless, mouths stretched wide in silent screams. The maze walls pulsed, closing in. Only when Jenna shoved her shoulder through did the hedge break, spilling them out onto another path. They emerged beside a rusted bumper car arena. The cars sat in rows, their paint chipped, their wheels sunk into dust. Then one headlight flickered on. Another, then another. Engines sputtered. The cars whirred to life, though no riders sat inside. The first car lurched forward, ramming the side rail. Then another swerved, circling the arena. The smell of gasoline filled the air, though the tanks had long since rested empty. Suddenly, the cars turned toward the gate. Toward them. The gate burst as the first car rammed through, headlights blazing. They fled across the cracked asphalt as the car screeched behind, tires spitting sparks. Only when they dove into a food stall did the cars stop, headlights extinguished as though they'd never moved. The stall led into a building stacked with shelves. Faded prizes filled every surface. Dolls, stuffed animals, masks, toys. At first, the silence was almost comforting. Then the dolls began to whisper. Not words, just breathy sounds, like fabric rubbing together. Their button eyes shifted, following the group as they moved. One by one, the dolls turned their heads. "Don't touch anything," Nate warned. But Hannah brushed a shelf by mistake. A bear toppled into her hands. Its fabric was damp, its stuffing cold and wet. The bear's mouth split open, teeth glinting beneath the fur. She screamed and hurled it away. The shelves erupted, prizes tumbling, crawling, dragging themselves across the floor. The three barely escaped before the building collapsed inward, consumed by its own toys. Beyond the prize house stood a pavilion. A single figure waited there. He looked human at first, dressed in a conductor's coat, face pale beneath a bowler hat. But as he moved, gears clicked inside his chest. His eyes spun like dials. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice metallic. "Then let us go," Jenna begged. He smiled. "The park doesn't let go." His jaw unhinged, metal teeth worried, gears spinning faster. Nate grabbed Hannah's arm, pulling her past as the man lunged. Sparks flew when his fingers scraped the stone. They didn't stop until the pavilion was far behind. The next building looked like a museum. Faded letters spelled House of Wax. Inside, rows of wax figures stood frozen. Carnival goers, workers, even children. Their features were melted, dripping down their torsos. But as the group passed, the figures' heads turned, their waxy eyes rolled, mouths opening. "Stay forever," they murmured in unison, voices soft and sticky. The figures stepped off their pedestals, wax dripping onto the floor. Their bodies warped, stretching toward the intruders. Jenna shrieked. They pushed through the door just as the wax surged forward, sealing the room behind. A photo booth leaned against a fence. curtain half drawn. "Don't," Hannah said, but Nate pulled the curtain anyway. Inside, strips of photos were scattered. He picked one up. It showed the 5 of them Taylor, included standing at the park entrance. Another strip showed them at the carousel. Another at the Ferris wheel. Each photo depicted them deeper and deeper inside, like the park had been watching. The last strip showed only 3. Nate, Hannah, Jenna. Their faces were pale, their eyes black. He dropped the photos, and the booth door slammed shut on its own. The sweet smell hit them next. A candy apple cart stood intact, glass windows gleaming, dozens of apples sat on sticks, their red coating shining wet. Hannah's stomach growled despite her fear. "I'm hungry." She reached for one before Nate could stop her. The candy cracked beneath her teeth. Inside, the apple was rotten, black liquid spilling down her chin. She gagged, dropping it. The other apples burst at once, their candy shells shattering. Inside, each was not fruit, but lumps of meat, veins pulsing faintly. The smell turned sour. The cart collapsed, spilling its contents onto the ground, where they twitched like living things. A striped tent loomed ahead, ropes snapping in the wind. The flap opened, inviting them inside. Rows of cages filled the tent. Empty at first glance, but as they passed, shapes stirred. One cage held a figure with too many limbs, curled into itself. Another contained a torso without a head, yet it breathed. "Step right up," a voice crooned. A ringmaster stood on a platform, his coat moth-eaten, his top hat sagging, his eyes burned faint. "Marvels and monstrosities," he said, arms wide. "All that's left behind when the lights go out." The cages rattled, the things inside pressed against the bars. The 3 fled before the ringmaster could step down. "They collapsed onto a bench outside." Breath ragged. Then, faintly, the calliope music started again. It swelled, rolling across the park. The notes were broken, shrill, but insistent. The carousel spun in the distance. The horses rose and fell violently, and for the first time, the music formed words. Round and round, round and round, round and round forever. The voices layered until it was unbearable. The 3 clutched their ears, but the sound was inside them now, rattling their skulls. Only when the music cut suddenly to silence could they breathe again. Another booth. Wooden rifles leaned against the counter. Targets of clowns and ducks swung gently. Though no wind stirred, a sign read, "Hit the bullseye." Nate's hand trembled as he picked up a rifle. It was loaded. He didn't know why, but he fired. The bullet struck a clown target. The wood splintered, then bled. The clown face twitched, painted eyes rolling toward him. The other targets began to move, stepping from the board, their painted grins stretching wider. Nate dropped the rifle and ran. Behind them, the targets shuffled from their places, dragging splintered legs across the floor. They entered a covered walkway, its roof sagging. Inside, posters lined the walls, smiling families, clowns, fireworks, but the faces were wrong. Smiles too wide, eyes too dark. Halfway through, the tunnel groaned. Boards splintered overhead. Run, Nate shouted. They sprinted as the roof collapsed behind them, boards crashing down. When they burst out the other side, the tunnel was gone. Only open field stretched behind them. The park had shifted again. A stage stood crooked in the field, tilted to one side. Spotlights snapped on. 3 microphones waited. The speakers crackled. "Sing for us." "No," Jenna whispered. The ground shook. "Sing?" Hannah, trembling, stepped forward. She opened her mouth, voice cracking into a tune. The park echoed her song, twisting it into shrieks. The spotlights flared, and shadows of an audience appeared, clapping, cheering. Hannah collapsed when the lights went out, blood trickling from her ears. She whispered, "It's feeding on us." The next building was painted with wide grins and balloons. Inside, mannequins dressed as clowns stood in rows, their heads lolled, makeup smeared. One clown's hand twitched. Then another. Soon, all of them turned, eyes glowing faint beneath their painted lids. They began to laugh, not in unison, discordant, overlapping, horrible. The group backed away slowly. One clown broke into a run. Then another. The building erupted in motion as the mannequins chased them, dozens of clowns pounding the floor with hollow feet. They didn't stop running until the laughter faded. They reached a pond at the park's edge. Its surface was still, reflecting the sky perfectly. Jenna knelt, staring into the water. But the reflection wasn't her. It was Tyler. He smiled faintly, lifting his hand. "Come in." "No," Nate said, yanking her back. The reflection's smile widened, mouth splitting too far. More faces rose in the water. Kyle, children, clowns, pale strangers. Their hands broke the surface, reaching. The pond boiled with them. The 3 stumbled back as the water erupted, splashing black onto the ground. A rope bridge stretched across a gully. Wooden marionettes hung from the ropes, their strings tangled. As they stepped on, the puppets twitched. One lifted its head. Cross with the bridge swayed violently, ropes snapping. The marionettes writhed, jerking, strings wrapping around wrists and ankles. Nate slashed at them with a loose board, breaking through. They sprinted to the other side, collapsing on the dirt. Behind them, the bridge snapped entirely, falling into the gully. The puppets dangled in the dark, swaying. The park's voice came then, not through speakers, not through rides, through the ground itself. "You are ours." The words thrummed in their bones, vibrating their teeth. "You came inside. You belong." Jenna clutched her head, screaming, "Shut up! Shut up!" The earth pulsed, rides shuddering in the distance. "You are part of the carnival now." And in the silence that followed, they knew it was true. They pressed on, desperate. But when Nate turned, Jenna wasn't there. Hannah. His voice broke. She shook her head. She was right behind us. The midway stretched empty. In the distance, Nate saw Jenna. She stood with the carousel riders, pale and hollow-eyed, swaying as the horses rose and fell. Her mouth moved, whispering the tune of the calliope. Then she was gone. Only two remained. Nate and Hannah stumbled onto a path that spiraled inward, lined with cracked lamps. At the center stood nothing, just bare dirt. They circled once. When they tried to leave, the path twisted back. They circled again. Each time, the lamps burned brighter. Shadows followed them on the inside of the spiral, shadows with too many arms, too many mouths. Only when Nate dragged Hannah through the dirt wall itself did they break free. Coughing in the weeds, another striped tent loomed, larger than the rest. Its canvas pulsed faintly, like breath. When they touched it, the surface was warm. The flap opened, revealing rows of seats inside. A circus ring waited at the center. The tent walls expanded and contracted with each breath. Hannah whispered, "We're inside its body." The seats filled one by one with shadows. An audience assembling. The ring lit up. Perform. They ran before the show began. The tent collapsed behind them. Shrieking, they stumbled into another ride. A smaller roller coaster, its cars shaped like bones. The track groaned. Cars rattling forward. "Not again," Nate muttered. But Hannah was literally pulled toward a car, her feet dragged against the dirt. He grabbed her, yanking hard. The car snapped shut anyway. Empty, it rattled down the track. Screams echoing, though no one rode. At the end of the loop, the car derailed, slamming into the ground. It burst into a pile of bones. The central clock tower loomed once more. Its hands twitched, spinning wildly. Midnight. 1, 2, the bell tolled. With each chime, the park shifted. Rides flickered, appearing and vanishing. The midway warped. On the 12th toll, the ground split, swallowing booths whole. Hannah screamed. Nate dragged her back as the plaza crumbled. The bell fell, shattering stone. Silence followed. The clock's hands froze at 13. They ran blindly, the park collapsing around them. Footsteps followed. Not one set. 100. The riders, the clowns, the dolls, the children, all chasing. Hannah tripped. Nate lifted her, holding her forward. The voices screamed, "Stay!" The Ferris wheel loomed ahead, its gondolas swaying violently. The steps closed in. The Ferris wheel groaned. One gondola hung open, swaying gently. Hannah grabbed Nate's hand. "If we don't, it'll take us anyway." Together, they climbed inside. The wheel lurched upward, dragging them higher. Below, the carnival surged with shadows, hundreds of figures reaching. The wheel creaked. The gondola rocked. Hannah whispered, "We're not leaving, are we?" Nate squeezed her hand. Maybe we never could." The wheel carried them higher until the park spread below, endless shifting. Then the gondola tipped. Morning came to Growick. The Ferris wheel stood silent against the horizon. The gates hung open. The wind whistled through, carrying faint music. Inside, the park was still. No bodies, no intruders. But if you stood long enough, You could hear laughter. You could smell sugar on the air. And sometimes, if the sun hit the Ferris wheel just right, you could see two shadows in one gondola. They never moved. They were part of the carnival now. And the carnival never really closed.